2025 is already shaping up to be a benchmark year in testing the rule of law in this country, and not in small part because Donald Trump has vowed to appoint a rogues gallery of convicted criminals, billionaires, and MAGA faithfuls to run essential government departments. And they've made their intentions to enact the president's agenda quite clear, no matter how illegal his agenda might be, or how many legal troubles they've had in the past. For more, we turn to chaos lawyer Liz Dye.
Thanks, Stefan. Donald Trump's list of nominees to fail his next administration is packed with people who could not pass a background check to coach Little League. Whether they're shooting dogs, possibly eating dogs, or making fake dog money, they're a pretty mangy lot.
They're eating the dogs.
They've also got some interesting legal issues of their own, and many of them have expressed an intention to break the law if given the reins of power. So let's talk about some of these nominees and their brushes with the law, past and perhaps future. First up, Kash Patel, Trump's pick to lead the FBI. With Matt Gaetz flaming out as the candidate for Attorney General, Patel is the undisputed champion of problematic Trump administration appointees, and it's a crowded field. Before entering the political arena, Patel served as a lawyer in the counterterrorism section of the Justice Department's National Security Division. His work earned mixed reviews, with one federal judge in Texas citing him with an order of ineptitude, which is just exactly what it sounds like, and calling him just one more non-essential employee from Washington who doesn't add a bit of value. That one's gonna leave a mark. Patel blamed the local U.S. attorneys in Texas for not sticking up for him, which fed his longtime resentment of civil servants, whom he calls, of course, the deep state. Patel went on to work as a Republican congressional aide and then as a staffer on Trump's National Security Council, where he was widely distrusted by both career officials and political appointees. When Trump floated making Patel deputy head of the FBI, Attorney General Bill Barr said it would happen over my dead body. CIA Director Gina Haspel threatened to resign if Trump saddled her with Patel as her number 2 guy. And Charles Cooperman, Trump's deputy national security advisor who supervised Patel directly, told the Wall Street Journal that Patel was absolutely unqualified for this job and untrustworthy, and called it an absolute disgrace to American citizens to even consider an individual of this nature for the top job at the FBI. Trump himself appointed current FBI Director Chris Wray for a 10-year term. So why is he convinced that Patel is the right man for the job? Well, after Trump left office, Patel rebranded himself as a MAGA influencer. He sold wine. Yes, that's his logo. He wrote a series of children's books about King Donald doing battle with the evil Hillary Clinton with the aid of a wizard named Kash, obviously. He produced a recording of the January 6th rioters singing the Star-Spangled Banner. And he served on the board of Trump's Truth social media company, where he played footsie with the QAnon cult as he tried to build the brand. He also promised that when Trump came back to power, he would go after media critics.
We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. Yes, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. We're going to come after you. Whether it's criminally or civilly, we'll figure that out. But yeah, we're putting you all on notice. And Steve, this is why they hate us. This is why we're tyrannical. This is why we're dictators.
Oh, hey, that's me. And in his book, Government Gangsters, not for children, I guess, he lays out the enemy's list of evil deep staters. Obviously, it includes Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Special Counsel Robert Mueller. But it also includes a bunch of Trump administration officials, including Barr, Haspel, and even Chris Wray himself. And if you're thinking, wow, that sounds like he wants to target anyone who ever said anything mean about him, Patel is currently threatening to sue former Pence aide Olivia Troy for saying mean words about him on MSNBC. Kash Patel's appointment to lead the FBI is a serious threat to the rule of law and order in this country. Since the 1990s, the FBI has designated far-right extremist groups as the top domestic threat to national security, and in 2020 elevated this threat to the same level as ISIS. Yet Patel seems to have a distorted view on exactly what a threat from within truly is. So if you're looking for someone who's likely to break the law, maybe start with the guy who promises to prosecute his critics for the crime of writing mean words about him and Donald Trump. Next up, we have Russell Vought, nominated to head the Office of Management and Budget, which sounds pretty nerdy and technical, and Vought certainly looks the part. But he's at the forefront of Trump's effort to wrest control of the budget away from Congress. Specifically, he believes that the 1974 Impoundment Control Act is unconstitutional. And when this issue comes to a head, we'll probably be giving you another video on that one too. But in a nutshell, the spending clause of the Constitution gives Congress power to set the budget. Basically, Congress tells the executive branch how much money to spend and what to spend it on, and then the president does it. The president does not have the authority to refuse to spend that money except in a very narrow set of circumstances. And if he does, he has to tell Congress about it. But in 2019, Trump secretly withheld congressionally allocated foreign aid to Ukraine as a part of his effort to pressure Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, to do us a favor, though, and announce a criminal investigation of Joe and Hunter Biden. And he did it with the help of one Russ Vought, who was then the acting head of the Office of Management and Budget. The withholding was illegal, as the U.S. Government Accountability Office said in 2020. Faithful execution of the law does not permit the president to substitute his own policy priorities for those that Congress has enacted into law. OMB withheld funds for a policy reason which is not permitted under the Impoundment Control Act. Trump broke that law, which led to his first impeachment. Ultimately, nothing ever happened to Vought, much less Trump, as a result of violating the ICA. But Vought is on record saying that he thinks that the Impoundment Act is unconstitutional. On the day before Trump left office, Voss sent a letter to the chair of the House Budget Committee complaining that the law was an unworkable usurpation of presidential authority. Vought also happens to be one of the key architects of Project 2025. Check out the video we did on this here channel. In it, he more or less said that he was going to violate the ICA and challenge Congress to do something about it. So yeah, seems like a safe bet that we'll be talking about old Russ pretty soon, particularly if these guys have anything to say about it. On November 12th, Trump announced that the great Elon Musk, working in conjunction with the American patriot Vivek Ramaswamy, will lead the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. Together, these two wonderful Americans will pave the way for my administration to dismantle government bureaucracy, slash excess regulations, cut wasteful expenditures, and restructure federal agencies, essential to the Save America movement. This will send shockwaves through the system and anyone involved in government waste, which is a lot of people, stated Mr. Musk. Which is more or less what Musk said about Twitter before he paid $44 billion for it, fired 70% of the staff, and tanked the company's value by 80%. So that's working out awesome. Okay, look. You cannot create a department of the federal government by tweet. And neither Musk nor Ramaswamy want to actually join the government because then they'd have to at least pretend to comply with anti-corruption laws. And Musk has multiple businesses that do business with the US government, including a rocket company that relies on taxpayer dollars from the federal government to stay in business. Which is why Trump says that the Doge Bros will provide advice and guidance from outside of government and will partner with the White House and Office of Management and Budget to drive large-scale structural reform and create an entrepreneurial approach to government never seen before. So remember like 30 seconds ago when I said Russ Vought wants to ignore Congress and allow the president to unilaterally cut and defund federal agencies? That's what these guys plan to do. And in fact, the Doge dinguses are already fantasizing about slashing healthcare for veterans for efficiency. And they want to get rid of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which just so happens to regulate crypto and all of the financial technology companies where these guys make their money. They don't call them the PayPal Mafia for nothing. But Musk and Ramaswamy may face one or two teeny tiny issues. For one thing, there's no such thing as an executive branch department that exists outside of government, as Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren explained to CNN's Jim Acosta.
If there's a plan that the President Trump wants to propose to the Congress, he should send it to us. But the Constitution does not permit the president to simply avoid what the Congress has done. That power of the purse is with the legislative branch, not the president.
To the extent that Doge is actually a thing, it's a federal advisory committee, which is governed by the Federal Advisory Committee Act. And that law has some very specific provisions. It says that an advisory committee shall not meet or take any action until an advisory committee charter has been filed. Committee meetings must be open to the public, announced in advance, and all records maintained and publicly available, which does not seem to be how Elon and Vivek intend to run this thing. But perhaps more to the point, they seem to be under the impression that they have some kind of legal mandate to slash through the federal budget and cut programs they don't like. And that is also not a thing. Again, Congress has the power of the purse under the Constitution. And I know the federal budget isn't sexy, but it's going to provide so many avenues for law breaking in the next 4 years, even and maybe especially when it comes to immigration, which brings us to the next entry in our list.
Now, obviously, if you're going to upend the entire federal government, you'll want a good lawyer. But if you want a great lawyer, my law firm, the Eagle team, can help. If you've gotten in a car crash, suffered a data breach, especially if you got one of those data breach letters saying that your information might have been leaked, or are dealing with a workers' comp or social security issue, we can represent you or help find you the right attorney. It's so important to talk to a lawyer right away so you can maximize your recovery. And by the way, we don't get paid unless you do, and there's nothing up front. So just click on the link in the description or call the phone number on screen for a free consultation with my team. Because you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle team. The link is below.
Meet Stephen Miller, Thomas Homan, and Kristi Noem. Miller and Homan were responsible for the child separation policy in the first Trump administration, which saw thousands of children separated from their parents and caregivers, many of whom were never reunited. Trump has named Miller his Homeland Security advisor and said that Homan will serve as border czar. Neither one of these is a position that requires Senate confirmation, but they'll likely wield a huge amount of power. Kristi Noem, the current governor of South Dakota, has been nominated to head the Department of Homeland Security. She's gotten a lot of negative coverage because she shot the family dog Cricket and then bragged about it in her biography. But let's not forget that Noem forced out a state employee after her daughter Cassidy failed her real estate appraiser's licensing exam, and that Noem is barred from entering Native American reservations by all 9 tribes in her home state for trying to criminalize protest against an oil pipeline, killing her dog, and then demonizing immigrants. A lot of low cards in that hand. So let's start with Homan. Trump ran on a promise to deport millions of undocumented immigrants, and Homan has vowed to start rounding up people on day one.
To the millions of illegal aliens that Joe Biden's releasing our country in violation of federal law, you better start packing now.
How does he hope to achieve this? Well, he's threatening to withhold federal money from states that refuse to cooperate with his plan. And by this point in this video, it should come as no surprise to you that that might pose 1 or 2 legal issues. First of all, the president can't just order states to enforce federal law. The Supreme Court has repeatedly found that that would violate the 10th Amendment. Most famously in Prince v. U.S. in 1997, which involved gun background checks, and in National Federation of Independent Business v. Sebelius in 2012, which invalidated a provision of the Affordable Care Act, which would have forced states to expand Medicaid and ensure access to more health care for poor people. So Trump, or Homan as his proxy, can't just order state law enforcement officials to become de facto border patrol and immigration agents. Second, Trump can't just put the screws to local and state officials by, say, withholding education dollars until they knuckle under and start rounding up immigrants. There are 2 strands of legal reasoning here. The first arises from cases like Pennhurst School v. Halderman in 1984, in which the Supreme Court said that the executive branch could not impose conditions on accepting federal funds after the fact and absent a specific authorization by Congress. And in 1987, in South Dakota v. Dole, the court said that Congress could condition federal highway funds on the state raising its drinking age to 21 because road safety and drinking age are correlated. But Congress, much less the president, cannot withhold unrelated federal allocations to punish the states and try to force them to do something unconstitutional, i.e. violate the 10th Amendment. Now, I know the Supreme Court has done a lot of crazy stuff lately, but as it stands now, the law very clearly prevents Trump from cutting off blue states and so-called sanctuary cities from all federal funds to force them to violate the 10th Amendment. And Homan isn't a law enforcement official at all. He's just a guy Trump is calling a czar because he wants to give him power without going through the congressional approval process. Homan has no authority to lock up blue city mayors as he's threatened to do. That's the province of U.S. attorneys and the Justice Department, which may or may not be willing to try it. But Homan is just beating his chest on TV because it's fun and it makes him feel strong and manly. Okay, all of that is very depressing. So let's take a little break for a section on what you might call the Goobers. These are the guys who may or may not break the law in ways that are sometimes hilarious but do not involve rounding up millions of people or destroying the economy or forging new ground in First Amendment jurisprudence. Conveniently, a bunch of them have already broken the law, so we know who they are. On December 4th, 2024, Trump announced that Peter Navarro would serve as the senior counselor for trade and manufacturing, which is great timing for Pete since he just got out of jail this summer and is looking for a job. You may remember Navarro from our tariff video, since he's the genius who convinced Trump that trade wars were good and easy to win. He blew off a subpoena from the January 6th committee and got himself convicted of contempt of Congress. He's also been involved in a civil suit with the Justice Department for years now, since he did government business on his encrypted Proton Mail account and refused to hand over those emails, which were very clearly presidential records. Navarro is an economist, but during the last Trump administration, he LARPed as an epidemiologist, an immunologist, and an election law expert. During the COVID pandemic, he was responsible for saddling the federal government with millions of doses of the anti-malarial drug hydroxychloroquine, and then publicly going to battle with the FDA, which said the drug was ineffective against COVID. It was, however, effective against autoimmune disorders like lupus, and hoarding the drug caused a national shortage. Navarro has also cosplayed as a lawyer, representing himself both in court and before Congress. What could possibly go wrong? Next up is Charles Kushner, father of Trump's son-in-law Jared. Papa Kushner tried to cover up an illegal campaign finance contribution by paying a prostitute to seduce his brother-in-law and secretly recording their liaison, then sending the videos to his sister in hopes that the brother-in-law would not testify against him, as one does. He served 14 months at a federal prison in Alabama and was pardoned in Trump's last weeks in office. Trump has tapped him to serve as ambassador to France. Quel dommage! Quel dommage. Quel dommage, je suis désolé. And speaking of ridiculous, Sebastian Gorka is back. Gorka is a cartoon character who knocked around the White House shouting about national security for 7 months during the first Trump administration until he was eased out in August of 2017 when it became clear that he was never, not ever going to get a security clearance. Gorka wandered off to become the spokesman for a fish oil supplement company and to yell online all day.
The era of the pajama boy is over January 20th, and the alpha males are back.
He's basically that kid who brings throwing stars to school and brags that he took Aikido over the summer, so you better watch your back. And soon, he'll be deputy assistant to the president and senior director for counterterrorism. As far as we know, Gorka has no criminal record, but he does have a habit of leaving his Mustang in places that are not parking spots, and yeah, he really did have vanity plates that said Art of War. And on the subject of meatheads, Trump has nominated Matthew Whitaker to be our ambassador to NATO. For a brief moment during the first Trump administration, between when Trump fired Jeff Sessions and when Bill Barr was confirmed, Whitaker served as the acting attorney general. In their book, A Very Stable Genius, Philip Rucker and Carol Leonnig wrote that Whitaker was known to career officials who served under him as Mongo after the big dumb galoot in the movie Blazing Saddles. Apparently, Whitaker spent more time developing his delts than his legal theories, which is very on brand for a guy who left a job as the U.S. attorney in Iowa and went on to represent a company that marketed the masculine toilet for the well-endowed gentleman who can't keep his bits out of the bowl. That company was cited for making false claims and shut down by the Federal Trade Commission, but Whitaker was never charged. And speaking of the FTC, fun times are over now, because now we have to talk about all the appointees who are going to trample the First Amendment and take revenge on the administration's critics. The Federal Trade Commission is charged with protecting the interests of consumers and promoting competition, including lodging antitrust enforcement actions against companies that violate the Clayton and Sherman Antitrust Acts. The agency is governed by 5 commissioners, no more than 3 of whom can be from the same party. The president taps one of the commissioners to serve as FTC chair. As journalist Mike Masnick pointed out at the website TechDirt, 2 Republicans are battling it out in public, trying to impress Trump and get tapped to lead the commission. And they're doing it by promising to go after social media companies for the dastardly crime of fact-checking and content moderation, which, you may note, has nothing to do with antitrust or competitiveness, but it is high on Trump's priority list. So the 2 commissioners seized on a totally unrelated ruling against an online sneaker company called GOAT to slide into Trump's DMs. Commission member Melissa Holyoke put out a concurring statement saying that the FTC should moderate all companies in new or emerging areas. For example, we must better understand how platforms enforce their terms of service to deny access or services to users or moderate speech about controversial topics. A comprehensive approach to behavioral remedies using our consumer protection and antitrust authorities can reduce tech's ability to unlawfully remove Americans off their platforms. That's crazy. The federal government is not supposed to be in the business of administering behavioral remedies, particularly when they come in the form of antitrust enforcement actions designed to police speech. Companies have a First Amendment right to host or not host any speech they like. There's nothing unlawful about that. Holyoke's colleague Andrew Ferguson went even further, arguing that platforms are illegally censoring speech and that advertiser boycotts violate antitrust law. He suggested that the FTC should go after industry groups like World Federation of Advertisers' Global Alliance for Responsible Media, which express their opinion about brand safety for companies looking to buy ad space. It's probably just a coincidence that ex-Twitter sued the World Federation of Advertisers, blaming it for the massive exodus of corporate advertisers after Musk took over the platform and welcomed back all the Nazis. Well, look, we got a video on that one too. Again, this is nuts. Trade groups have a free speech right to say that they think brands are taking a risk by advertising with a company that will run their ads next to content that consumers find objectionable. And, contrary to Ferguson's claims, advertiser boycotts based on speech, not to derive a competitive market advantage, do not violate antitrust law. That's just basic First Amendment stuff. And yet, Brendan Carr, Trump's nominee to lead the Federal Communications Commission, is saying exactly the same thing as Holyoke and Ferguson. The FCC is a federal agency which works to ensure access to communications technology. In the past, that meant radio and analog TV. Today, the FCC is tasked with expanding access to digital broadband and ensuring competition among cable and internet providers. But Carr is threatening to use the agency to crack down on Trump's critics.
And what should be the ramification here? Yeah, we need to keep every single remedy on the table. I mean, one of the remedies the FCC has ultimately would be license revocation if we find that it's egregious, and we'll see what they have to say about this. But it needs to deter this type of conduct, because when you're 50 hours before the opening of Election Day, the whole purpose of this rule is to give people a fair shot.
After Saturday Night Live gave Vice President Kamala Harris a cameo, he went on Fox to threaten to pull NBC's broadcast license. That was so fractally wrong, it's hard to even know where to start. I mean, NBC doesn't have a broadcast license. The network gave Trump equal time during a NASCAR event. The penalty for violating the equal time rule is functionally nothing, not getting pulled off the air. But Carr wasn't done. Here he is tweeting threats at NewsGuard, a website which rates news outlets on the basis of their reliability. That is clearly First Amendment protected speech. And even if it wasn't, it would be outside the remit of the FCC. Again, this is not a complicated or close issue. And yet, there are a whole bunch of incoming Trump appointees who seem extremely confused about the First Amendment. For instance, Trump's nominee to lead the National Institute of Health, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, a doctor who was roundly criticized for his statements about coronavirus, is now proposing to cut research grants to institutions that are too woke, which is clearly a First Amendment violation. And this discussion of free speech brings us back to where we started, at the Justice Department, specifically the FBI, with Kash Patel threatening to prosecute journalists. And that's where the rubber meets the road. Because most of what we're talking about here is civil. That is, the laws that these Trump appointees will break are things that will result in litigation where the government is the defendant, not criminal charges. And the Justice Department is going to factor into this in two ways. First, it's going to draw up legal opinions purporting to justify anything that Trump and his appointees want to do. And second, when citizens inevitably sue to vindicate their rights, the DOJ will defend these policies in court. So it matters that the top three posts at the Justice Department, along with the White House counsel and the Solicitor General, will all be Donald Trump's personal lawyers. Pam Bondi, the nominee for Attorney General now that Matt Gaetz is gone, represented Trump at his impeachment. Her deputies, Todd Blanche and Emile Beauvais, along with future Solicitor General John Sauer, were Trump's own criminal lawyers. And White House counsel nominee David Warrington represented Trump and the Trump campaign, working to suppress reporting, such as by sending cease and desist letters to reporters and filing a complaint with the Federal Election Commission seeking to block Vice President Harris from accessing President Biden's campaign funds. In short, none of these people are going to say no to the president. No one is going to say, that's illegal, sir, and you cannot do it, because they don't see themselves as lawyers for America. They are and will continue to be lawyers for Trump. And that's kind of the point. Because Russ Vought and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and Tom Homan are all carrying out the president's agenda. And so if the question is, who in the upcoming Trump administration is going to break the law the most? Well, it's probably the guy in charge. You know, the one who's telling you he's going to end birthright citizenship for children born here and deport them if their parents are undocumented immigrants, and threatening to lock up anyone who criticizes the Supreme Court, and threatening to jail journalists who report on government leaks, and to use the army to enforce immigration law, and considering what happened last time around, it seems like we already know who'll be the biggest lawbreaker in the second Trump administration.
Thanks, Liz. Now, when researching the story, we were unsurprised to learn that Trump appointee Elon Musk is now helping to write a law that regulates social media companies in what may very well be the most blatant conflict of interest, since the former Vice President Dick Cheney chose Halliburton to rebuild Iraq's oil fields. But we were also surprised by the biased distribution of the story's reporting on this. 83% of the sources lean right, only 8% of the sources lean left, and 8% of the sources were in the center. And we never would have found this story if it weren't for today's sponsor, Ground News. Ground News is a tool that we use every day here at LegalEagle. It's a website and app developed by a former NASA engineer on a mission to give readers an easy, data-driven, objective way to read the news. And right now, they're having their biggest sale of the year and offering LegalEagle viewers 50% off their unlimited access Vantage subscription. You can scan the QR code or just use the link in the description to get a discount for a limited time. Because Ground News gathers related articles from around the world and across the political spectrum, so you can see the bias and compare coverage. Every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality, and ownership of the source's reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. And I've really been enjoying a tool of theirs called the My News Bias, which tracks your reading habits over time. I've been able to track the news outlets that I read the most, the reliability and ownership of these outlets, and even the topics and issues that I tend to read and click on. It's really helping me be more mindful of the news that I digest. Now, Ground News is my favorite way to get the news, and if you click on the link in the description, you can save 50% off the Ground News Vantage subscription. That subscription gives you unlimited access to every feature, including the My News Bias and the Blind Spot tool that we've used in the production of this video. And by subscribing, you'll support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent. So just click on the link below to get 50% off. And after that, click on this box over here for more Legal Eagle, or I'll see you in court.